The lawyer's voice cracked the silence of the room like a whip. "Mr. Cole, before we proceed with the reading of your father's will, there's an additional matter that has come to light." I sat frozen, clutching the edges of the worn leather chair, the smell of old books and dust choking me. I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, smug and expectant, like she was already counting the money in her head. Her manicured hand casually draped over the armrest, her bright red nails tapping an impatient beat. She had the nerve to wear white today. White. Like she was some innocent widow instead of the parasite that had clung to me for over 2 decades. I barely heard the lawyer as he cleared his throat and continued. There were recent DNA tests included as part of the estate planning. Sarah's tapping stopped. She stiffened, ever so slightly, a flicker of something crossing her face. It was gone in a second, replaced with that smug grin she thought made her look clever. She had no idea. Not yet. I turned my head just enough to catch her expression without making it obvious. I remembered the countless nights I'd spent lying awake next to her, wondering what had happened to the woman I married. When had she turned into this stranger who looked through me like I was a piece of old furniture? When had her laugh at my jokes turned into a polite chuckle or worse, a sigh of irritation? The last 6 months had been hell. Silent, burning hell? I hadn't told her I knew. I hadn't confronted her about the late nights, the business trips, the perfume that wasn't hers, the lies stacked so high they threatened to suffocate me. No, I had smiled. I had played the fool. Because fools gather evidence. Fools prepare. Due to certain concerns, the lawyer was saying, a private investigator was hired independently by the estate's trustees. DNA samples were taken, discreetly, and matched against Mr. Cole's biological children. My heart was pounding so loud I thought the whole room could hear it. Across from me, Sarah's hand slid off the armrest. Her face was pale now, the blood draining fast. She knew. Neither Samuel Cole Jr. nor Victoria Cole are biological descendants of Mr. Cole, the lawyer said, his voice heavy with finality. The words dropped into the room like a bomb. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Sarah's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like a fish gasping for air. She turned to me, desperate now, her eyes wide and wild. "Babe, this is some mistake. Some clerical." I didn't even flinch. I didn't even look at her. I kept my eyes on the lawyer, who now avoided meeting mine. "Accordingly," he said, flipping through the paperwork with trembling fingers, "the inheritance designated for the children has been rescinded. Alternative beneficiaries have been named." A low, ugly sound escaped Sarah's throat, part shriek, part sob. She lunged toward me, grabbing my arm with both hands. "Richard, say something. You know this isn't true. You know it's not." Her voice cracked and wavered, but I stayed still, cold. In that moment, every humiliating whisper she had thought I hadn't heard came back to me. Every smirk, every late-night call she thought she had hidden, every time she sneered that I'd die alone while she still had her whole life ahead of her. I wanted her to feel what I had felt, and now she did. Fear, loss, powerlessness. Security moved in, 2 uniformed men in black suits who took her firmly by the elbows. "Ma'am, you'll need to leave." Sarah shrieked then, a high, broken sound. "You can't do this. This is my family. I am his wife." "You were his wife," I corrected coldly, finally turning to look at her. "You made sure you weren't his family a long time ago." She fought them, thrashing as they dragged her toward the heavy oak doors. Everyone watched in stunned silence, a few turning their heads, embarrassed by the spectacle. Not me. I watched every second. I wanted her to know she didn't just lose the money. She lost the image, the respect, the narrative she had been trying to write. As the doors slammed shut behind her, a wave of silence washed over the room again. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly for the first time in what felt like years. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Shall we proceed?" I gave him a small nod. Around me, the people who truly mattered, my brother, my nieces, my best friend of 40 years, leaned in closer, their faces warm, full of quiet support. My real family. The ones who never needed a blood test to prove their loyalty. But this was only the beginning. Because the story of how I got to that room, to that exact moment of triumph and betrayal, was long and brutal. And it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I should have known something was wrong the first time Sarah laughed when I mentioned my father's illness. It wasn't a real laugh. It was too sharp, too quick, like she couldn't wait to change the subject. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee, the smell of burnt toast hanging between us, and saying, "Dad's doctor said it might be time to start thinking about the will." Sarah had shrugged, not even looking up from her phone. "Well, at least you'll get something out of it." That should have been a red flag the size of Texas, but I pushed it down like I always did. Back then, I was still clinging to the hope that under all the bitterness and coldness, the woman I married still existed. I kept telling myself it was the stress, the economy, the kids, anything but the truth. Because admitting the truth would have shattered the life I had spent 23 years trying to protect. The deeper I look back now, the more I realize she wasn't even hiding it well. She thought she was untouchable, that I was too blind, too stupid, or too in love to notice how she stayed out later and later, how the kids started looking at her with confusion, how even her friends began acting strange around me, exchanging tight smiles and awkward glances. The unraveling really started 2 months before Dad passed. It was a Saturday night, and Sarah claimed she had a girls' night out. Nothing new. She'd been going out a lot more recently, always with vague plans and no specifics. I didn't press her. I didn't want to be that husband, the controlling, paranoid guy who smothered his wife. So I smiled, kissed her cheek, and said, "Have fun." She gave me that same mechanical smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes anymore, and disappeared out the door, perfume trailing behind her like smoke. But something felt off. It wasn't just intuition, it was bone deep. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't watch TV, couldn't focus on anything. Finally, without even knowing why, I grabbed my jacket and keys and drove toward town. I found her car easily enough. Parked outside a trendy rooftop bar she had never once mentioned to me in 23 years of marriage. I waited. Minutes turned to hours. Around midnight, I saw her stumble out, laughing, no, giggling on the arm of a man half my age. Some pretty boy with a spray-on tan and designer jeans, the kind of guy who wouldn't survive one winter fixing busted pipes like I did for a living. I didn't make a scene. I didn't rush up. I didn't shout. I just sat there in the darkness of my truck, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, feeling the foundations of my life cracking under me. I watched them kiss, openly, right there on the street like teenagers. She didn't even look guilty. When she finally drove off alone, thank God, something in me broke. But another part of me, the part one didn't know existed, hardened. I went home and started planning. I knew then that it wasn't just a one-time thing. There was something rotting underneath my marriage, something that had been festering for years, and it was time to dig it out by the roots. The next morning, she came home pretending nothing had happened. She made coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and asked if I wanted to go to brunch. Like she hadn't just spent the night selling out everything we'd built for a cheap thrill. I said yes. I smiled. I ate pancakes with her while she laughed at some stupid meme on her phone. I even pretended to laugh with her. Because now it was war. And wars aren't won by emotion. They're won by strategy. I needed evidence. I needed leverage. I needed to burn her bridges before she could burn mine. And I had no idea then just how deep the betrayal went. No idea that it wasn't just her sleeping around, that the kids I thought I had raised, protected, loved, weren't even mine. I would find that out soon enough. And when I did, there would be no mercy. After that night, something inside me flipped like a switch. I stopped being the husband who begged for scraps of affection. I became the man she should have feared from the start, the man who watched, listened, and remembered everything. I hired a private investigator the following Monday. His name was Travis Malone, a wiry, sharp-eyed guy who didn't waste words. I met him at a dingy diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and the coffee tasted like burnt tar. "I need the full truth," I told him, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Inside was every scrap of suspicion I'd collected so far, photos of Sarah's late nights, screenshots of vague text messages, receipts from out-of-town hotels she said were corporate conferences. It wasn't enough to burn her yet. I needed her cornered so completely that she couldn't wriggle free even if she tried. Travis leaned back, flipping through the folder with a slow smirk. "You sure you want to know all of it?" he asked. "Every goddamn word," I said without blinking. "All right, Mr. Cole," he said, tucking the folder into his jacket. "I'll dig. But brace yourself. It's never just one thing." I already knew that. Deep down, I knew. Meanwhile, at home, I played the perfect fool. I didn't question her when she came home smelling like a different cologne. I didn't flinch when she hit her phone every time it buzzed. I didn't say a word when she started locking the bedroom door behind her while she changed. Instead, I started making my own preparations. Silent ones. I opened new bank accounts in my name only. I documented every shared asset down to the last fork and lamp. I talked to my father's lawyer in secret, adjusting my own will. I even backed up my texts, emails, everything ready for the day when the house of cards collapsed. Then came the day Travis called. His voice was flat, professional. "You're going to want to sit down for this." I did. It wasn't just one guy. It was two, maybe more. A rotating door of flings and business trips that made my stomach turn. But that wasn't the worst of it. "You ever wonder why your son looks nothing like you?" Travis asked quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That thought had lived in the back of my mind for years like a parasite I refused to acknowledge. Samuel Jr., Sam, looked nothing like me. Not my eyes, not my height, not even my crooked smile. I told myself he took after Sarah's side. I believed it because I needed to believe it. Travis continued. I found medical forms. Paternity test kits she ordered. Stuff she never filed legally, but... He sighed. DNA doesn't lie. My world, already teetering, finally tilted. And Victoria? I choked out. The same, he said. Both of them. Neither one was mine. It felt like drowning in slow motion. Years of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, scraped knees, father-daughter dances, all of it flashed before my eyes, now smeared with the ugly truth. I wasn't just betrayed by my wife. I was betrayed by the life I thought we had. It was a betrayal so complete, so absolute, it stunned me into silence. But as the shock settled into a cold, hard rage, a terrifying clarity came with it. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No. I wasn't going to scream or throw accusations or beg for explanations. That would give her power. That would give her a narrative, another lie she could spin to everyone else, painting me as the crazy, bitter husband. No. I would let her build her fantasy a little higher. And then, at the perfect moment, I would tear it all down and leave her standing in the ruins, exposed for the fraud she was. The timing had to be perfect. And fate, it seemed, had handed me the perfect opportunity. My father's will reading. An event Sarah had been buzzing about for weeks, practically rubbing her hands together like a villain in a cartoon, thinking about all the money she was about to inherit by my side. She had no idea the real show was just getting started, and she was going to be the main act. The 2 weeks leading up to the will reading were some of the hardest of my life, and yet, every morning I woke up, I felt stronger, sharper, like I was finally seeing the world for what it was, stripped of every comforting illusion I'd ever clung to. Sarah, on the other hand, was radiant, disgustingly so. She bounced around the house like a teenager who'd just gotten her first credit card, humming while she packed designer clothes she bought on sale, chattering on the phone to friends about her big plans once the inheritance came through. She barely noticed me anymore. I was invisible to her, a ghost haunting the life she thought she'd already moved past. And I played my role perfectly. I smiled at the right times, nodded when she prattled on about European vacations and beach houses. If she noticed that my smiles didn't quite reach my eyes, she didn't care enough to ask. She wasn't even subtle anymore. Late-night texts, disappearing for hours with pathetic excuses about running errands. Once, I heard her laughing through the walls of our bedroom while she FaceTimed some guy whose voice dripped arrogance even through the plaster. I lay there in the dark, listening, my hands clenched into fists beneath the blanket, the cold metal of my wedding ring biting into my skin. Every petty, humiliating moment I swallowed down. Every laugh, every lie, every act of contempt fueled the bonfire building inside me. Because I knew something she didn't. I had spent those 2 weeks making sure that when the truth hit, it would hit so hard that she would never get back up again. The night before the will reading, Sarah came into the bedroom wearing a silk robe I'd bought her 10 years ago for our anniversary. It used to drive me crazy, seeing her in it. Now it made my skin crawl. She leaned against the doorframe, twirling a lock of her hair around one finger. "You ready for tomorrow, babe?" she purred. I didn't even look up from the book I was pretending to read. Ready for what? She rolled her eyes like I was some child she had to patiently endure. The will reading, duh? Your dad probably left you the house and that stupid cabin, but don't worry, we'll sell it. Get something better. I marked my page and set the book down slowly, letting the silence stretch until she started shifting uncomfortably. Whatever happens, I said, my voice calm, almost gentle, I'm sure it'll all work out the way it's supposed to. She grinned, not hearing the edge under my words. Damn right it will. She turned on her heel and sauntered off to call someone. I didn't even care who anymore. That night, I barely slept. I didn't toss and turn. I didn't replay old memories or cry into the darkness. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling something deep inside me solidify into steel. Morning came gray and cold. A perfect day for an execution. We drove separately to the lawyer's office downtown. I said I had errands to run first. She didn't even question it, too busy preening in the mirror, applying one last coat of lipstick, practicing her fake, grieving widow face. The lawyer's building was one of those old sandstone things, with heavy wooden doors and iron railings. It smelled like old paper and judgment. When I arrived, most of the family was already there. My brother Mark, his wife Angela, their 2 kids. A few cousins. Some family friends. They gave me nods, small smiles, pats on the back. Everyone knew Dad hadn't been an easy man, but he had been a good one. Sarah floated into the room 15 minutes late, wearing a black dress that hugged her body a little too tight for mourning. She strutted past everyone like she owned the place, barely bothering to nod at Mark or Angela. And the looks, God, the looks she gave the lawyer, slick, eager, greedy. She thought today was payday. She thought she had won. She didn't see me sitting there quietly, hands folded, a tiny smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. The lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, adjusted his glasses and called everyone to order. He opened a thick envelope, cleared his throat, and began. I, Samuel Lawrence Cole Sr., being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. His voice droned on, legal formalities, background noise. I barely heard it. I was watching Sarah out of the corner of my eye as she leaned forward, anticipation crackling off her like static electricity. Then Mr. Hargrove's voice changed, got tighter, rougher, and pursuant to certain private findings concerning paternity. Sarah flinched. The room shifted. A dozen heads turned toward her. I kept my eyes fixed on the lawyer. Calm. Cold. Mr. Hargrove swallowed hard and pressed on. Due to the results of DNA analysis confirming that neither Samuel Cole Jr. nor Victoria Cole are biological descendants of Samuel Lawrence Cole Sr. Gasps. Murmurs. Someone's chair scraped loudly against the floor. Sarah sat frozen, the blood draining from her face so fast I thought she might faint. And the best part? This was just the beginning. Because the next words out of the lawyer's mouth would tear her world to pieces. And I was going to savor every single second of it. Sarah tried to speak. I could see her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to force the words out, but nothing came. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, looking for an ally, someone to back her up, someone to tell her it was all some big mistake. But the faces staring back at her were cold, confused, horrified. Nobody was coming to save her. Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat again, a slight tremble in his hands as he shuffled the papers. Given the DNA evidence, Samuel Cole Sr. made amendments to his estate plan. His wishes are clear. Only his biological descendants and blood relatives are eligible beneficiaries. I could see the exact second it hit her. The inheritance. The house she'd already mentally redecorated. The money she'd planned to blow on her little boy toys. Gone. Ripped right out from under her perfectly manicured claws. No, Sarah finally screeched, standing so abruptly her chair crashed to the floor behind her. This is bullshit. I am family. I'm his daughter-in-law. You can't do this to me. Her voice cracked with hysteria, shrill and ugly. Mr. Hargrove remained composed, though the corners of his mouth twitched, like even he was struggling not to smile. Mrs. Cole, please sit down. This proceeding is governed by the decedent's express wishes, not by personal feelings. Sarah spun toward me, her eyes wild, accusing. Richard, tell them. Tell them I'm still your wife. Tell them I'm family. I just sat there, silent, watching her burn. You made this happen, she shrieked. You set me up. You bastard. Her shrill voice bounced off the ancient wood-paneled walls, the room vibrating with the ugliness she could no longer hide. People who had once made polite conversation with her at family gatherings now stared like they were seeing her for the first time. Seeing the rot, 2 security guards, stationed discreetly at the back of the room, began moving forward. Mr. Hargrove gave a tiny nod, almost imperceptible. Mrs. Cole, he said firmly, you are no longer an heir, nor a legal beneficiary. You need to leave. Now. Sarah's face twisted into something monstrous, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. You're all liars. This is a setup. He's lying. They're all lying. She pointed wildly at everyone. At me, at Mr. Hargrove, even at my brother and his family. This isn't over. The guards reached her, taking her by the arms. She struggled at first, clawing at their sleeves, but they were calm and efficient, steering her firmly toward the double doors. As they dragged her out, she locked eyes with me one last time. Hatred, rage, fear, all of it boiled in her gaze. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I wanted her to know this was the price of betrayal. The doors slammed shut behind her with a hollow, thunderous boom. The room breathed again. Someone coughed awkwardly. A woman I barely knew whispered, "Good riddance." Mr. Hargrove gave us all a moment to collect ourselves before clearing his throat again. Shall we proceed? He said, adjusting his papers. I leaned back in my chair, a slow breath easing out of my chest. The faces around me, my brother, my nieces, my cousins, were warm, real, filled with something Sarah could never fake. Loyalty. Family. My family. We listened as Mr. Hargrove laid out the new estate allocations. The house, the cabin, the investments. Everything was being divided among the people who truly mattered. I hadn't even known Dad made some of those changes. But somehow he had seen it. Maybe long before I did. Maybe fathers always know. As the proceedings wrapped up, Mark clapped me on the back and whispered, "Dad would be proud of you." I nodded but didn't say anything. I wasn't ready to feel pride yet. Because even though she was gone from that room, Sarah wasn't finished. Not yet. Women like her don't just slink away into the dark. They plot. They manipulate. They lash out. I knew she would come for me. I knew the storm was only beginning. But what she didn't know was that I had already fortified every inch of my life. She could come at me with everything she had left. It wouldn't matter. She was already defeated. She just didn't know it yet. I didn't even make it home before the first attack came. My phone vibrated violently in my pocket as I pulled out of the lawyer's parking lot. When I checked the screen, it was Sarah, calling. Again and again. 5, 10, 15 missed calls within minutes, each one more frantic than the last. By the time I turned onto our street, she was waiting on the front porch like a storm gathering strength, pacing in tight, furious circles, her heels clacking angrily against the concrete. Her makeup was smeared, her hair wild, her dress wrinkled and clinging to her like some cheap costume that had seen better days. As I pulled into the driveway, she charged down the steps toward me, hands balled into trembling fists. "You bastard!" she shrieked the moment I stepped out of the truck. "How dare you? You think you can humiliate me? You think you can ruin my life?" I locked the truck, calmly walking past her like she was a stranger in the street. She grabbed my arm, nails digging in, but I yanked it free with a force that sent her stumbling back a step. "You did that all by yourself, Sarah," I said coolly, finally looking her dead in the eye. "Congratulations." The words hit her harder than any slap. She froze for a second, lips quivering, eyes shining with unshed tears, but not tears of sadness. Tears of pure rage. You have nothing without me," she spat. "You think your pathetic little family is going to save you? They'll turn on you too. You'll die alone, Richard. Alone and miserable." The irony of her words almost made me laugh, but I held it back. I wanted her to feel that emptiness echoing inside her own chest, to see that I wasn't the broken, desperate man she thought she'd crafted. I turned my back on her and walked into the house. Locked the door. She hammered her fists against it, screaming curses, but I didn't even flinch. I simply leaned against the wall and sighed, breathing slowly, letting the moment settle over me like armor. Eventually, she gave up. The sound of tires squealing down the street told me she was gone. But I knew it wasn't the end. People like Sarah don't accept loss. They can't. She would come back, uglier and more vicious than before, grasping for anything she could destroy on her way down. Sure enough, within an hour, my phone lit up with incoming missiles, social media posts hinting I was abusive, cryptic Facebook rants about betrayal and liars, a carefully curated photo dump trying to paint herself as a suffering, innocent woman abandoned by a cruel husband. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so pathetic. Then came the texts to our friends, to distant relatives, spreading venom, twisting the story so that somehow she was the victim. I sat there reading each one with cold detachment, cataloging them like evidence in a trial. And oh, how sweet it would be to let them build. Because I wasn't rushing to defend myself. Not yet. People needed time to stew in the doubt, to wonder, to remember every strange thing they'd seen and never questioned. Every suspicious laugh, every cold shoulder, every story that didn't quite add up. Sarah was torching her own credibility without even realizing it. Every angry post, every desperate lie only made her look guiltier, more unstable. And while she was burning bridges, I was busy preparing the final blow. Earlier that day, before the reading, I had already contacted my father's private banker, quietly moved the accounts, locked down every asset tied to my name, filed formal complaints to cut off any claims she might attempt. My lawyer was filing separation papers that very night, with a mountain of evidence already attached. Sarah was swinging wildly in the dark, while I had been building an iron fortress around myself brick by brick. I spent the evening with my brother Mark and his family. We grilled steaks, drank a few beers, sat on the patio under the wide Texas sky, laughing about old memories and new beginnings. The real ones. The ones who mattered. It hit me then how different love looked compared to what I had lived with for so long. Love wasn't manipulation or guilt trips or icy silence. It wasn't someone keeping score or holding grudges like weapons. It was my niece climbing onto my lap just because. It was my brother handing me a cold beer without a word, just being there. It was simple, honest, warm. Everything Sarah had never been. Everything she would never understand. That night, as I lay in the guest bedroom at Mark's house, I stared at the ceiling, feeling something new stirring inside me. Not rage, not bitterness, freedom. But I knew the next few days would test that freedom. Sarah wasn't done. Women like her never surrender quietly. They explode. And when she did, I would be ready. Because this time, she wasn't just going to lose money. She was going to lose the story she had tried to write about herself. And I was going to make sure the whole world watched. The explosion came the next morning. It started before dawn, while the sky was still a bruised purple and the world was barely awake. My phone buzzed violently on the nightstand at Mark's house. It was vibrating so hard it nearly threw itself onto the floor. 37 missed calls, 18 voicemails, more than 60 text messages, all from Sarah. The first few texts were almost laughable, wild accusations that I had brainwashed everyone against her, that I was stealing what was rightfully hers. Then came the threats, lawsuits, restraining orders, even threats to expose me for things I hadn't even done. In her desperation, she was swinging in every direction, hoping something would land. I let the phone buzz. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a response. By noon, she had escalated. She showed up at my old workplace, sobbing loudly enough that the receptionist called security. She demanded to speak to my boss, claimed I was hiding money, that I was a fraud. Luckily, my boss was a no-nonsense man who had known me for 20 years. One look at Sarah's wild, tear-streaked face was enough to get her escorted off the premises. Next, she went to my mother's retirement home. Tried to cause a scene there, too. Tried to dig her claws into anyone who would listen. But every door she pounded on slammed shut in her face. Every desperate attempt only made her look more unhinged. Word was spreading fast, faster than I ever could have orchestrated. People love a scandal. They love even more to watch the mighty fall, especially when it turns out the perfect wife had been nothing but a fraud with a $1,000 manicure and a Walmart soul. The real nuclear bomb, though, came later that afternoon. I had been sitting on the patio with Mark, sipping coffee and soaking in the rare peace of a Texas spring, when my lawyer, Thomas Reed, called. "She filed a motion," he said without preamble. "Let me guess," I said dryly. "Emergency spousal support?" "Emergency everything," he said, almost chuckling. "She's claiming abandonment, emotional abuse, financial sabotage. She wants the house, the cars, half your pension, and retroactive alimony." I whistled low. "She moves fast when the cash dries up." Thomas laughed. "Don't worry. She has no case. The investigators' report? Bulletproof. The DNA results? Devastating. Her social media posts alone paint her as unstable. Honestly, this is the kind of thing law students pray for on exams." Still, hearing it laid out made the stakes real. Sarah wasn't just throwing tantrums now. She was trying to scorch the earth. I hung up, leaning back in my chair, staring up at the cloudless sky. Mark watched me for a moment. "You ready for this?" he asked. "More than ready," I said, and I meant it, because I wasn't the same man who had once believed every lie that slipped past Sarah's lips. I wasn't the fool who had excused away every late night, every excuse, every cold shoulder. I was the man who had clawed his way through betrayal and come out the other side sharper, smarter, meaner. And I was about to show her what real consequences looked like. We spent the rest of the day gathering documents, emails, messages, everything Sarah had foolishly left in her wake over the years. My lawyer wanted it all airtight, a case so tight she couldn't even dream of squeezing out of it. Meanwhile, Sarah's public meltdown continued. My cousin texted me screenshots of a Facebook Live video she had posted, sobbing into the camera, telling half-truths and full lies to anyone who would listen. She looked deranged, her voice high and broken, ranting about betrayal and injustice. There was even a moment, one perfect, shining moment, where she forgot to turn off the live feed and screamed at someone off camera. "You don't get it," she shrieked. "I deserve that money. I wasted my best years on that idiot." The internet never forgets. Within hours, the video went viral in our small town, ricocheting through every gossip chain, every coffee shop, every workplace. Sarah wasn't a wounded victim anymore. She was a punchline. That night, as I watched the footage over a cold beer, I realized something incredible. I didn't feel anger anymore. Not pity. Not regret. Nothing. Just freedom. She was doing my work for me. Every lie, every tantrum, every desperate play only tightened the noose around her own neck. And all I had to do was wait. Because the real reckoning, the one she would never walk away from, was still coming. And this time, it wouldn't just be me watching. It would be everyone. The court date came faster than I expected. Maybe it was because Sarah's frantic motions had clogged the docket like a flooded river. Emergency filings, demands, complaints, and the judge, an old hard-nosed Texan named Judge Langley, wasn't the type to let that nonsense clog up his courtroom for long. By the time we stepped into that heavy, wood-paneled room, Sarah had already destroyed any sympathy she might have squeezed out of the public, and she didn't even realize it. She was dressed for war, in a tight black dress and blood-red lipstick, her hair slicked back into a severe bun. She strutted into the courtroom with an expression that screamed victim to anyone foolish enough to look too quickly. But one look at her eyes, wild, twitching, desperate, and it was clear. She was already losing. My lawyer, Thomas Reed, nodded at me as I took my seat at the respondent's table. Across the aisle, Sarah glared like she wanted to set me on fire with her gaze. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't give her a damn thing. Judge Langley entered, slammed his gavel once, loud enough to make even Sarah twitch, and we were off. Her attorney was a weasel of a man, short and sweating, already stammering as he laid out her demands: emergency financial support, exclusive rights to the house, restitution for emotional trauma, and half of everything I owned. He tried to paint a picture of a poor, abandoned wife left destitute by her cruel, heartless husband. But then it was Thomas's turn. And Thomas didn't come to negotiate. He came to eviscerate. Your Honor, he began smoothly, stepping to the center of the room like he owned it. What we have here is not a case of abandonment. It's a case of prolonged, malicious deception. He laid out the timeline like a general laying out a battle plan. The affair, the evidence, the DNA tests, the will reading, the public meltdowns, the viral video. Piece by brutal piece, he dismantled every lie she had clung to. He handed the judge thick binders filled with evidence, surveillance photos, financial records, copies of texts and emails. He even played clips of her Facebook live rant, right there, for everyone in the courtroom to hear. You don't get it. I deserve that money, Sarah shrieked, trying to shout over the audio, but Judge Langley slammed the gavel down again. Silence, Mrs. Cole. I watched her shrink back into her chair, her facade cracking in real time. Her lawyer sat frozen, his hands limp at his sides. When Thomas was done, there was nothing left of her case. Judge Langley leaned forward, peering at Sarah like she was a bug under a microscope. Mrs. Cole, he said slowly, voice dripping with disdain, what exactly do you believe you're entitled to? Sarah stood up on shaky legs. I gave him my best years. I raised his kids. I built our home. He can't just throw me away. Judge Langley shook his head. You didn't raise his kids, ma'am. The DNA evidence makes that clear. You deceived him for over 20 years. You benefited financially from that deception. And now you come to this court asking for rewards for your betrayal. He paused, letting the words hang heavy in the room. Not in my courtroom. The final ruling was swift. She was awarded nothing. No house. No cars. No pension. Not a single cent. Instead, she was ordered to pay back a portion of the legal fees and to vacate the marital home within 30 days. The bailiff handed her the official papers. She stared down at them like she couldn't read a word. For a moment, I thought she might collapse. She turned to me then, hollow-eyed, mouth moving but no sound coming out. I simply stood, buttoned my jacket, and turned my back to her. I didn't need to say anything. The gavel had spoken for me. As I walked out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sun, I felt lighter than I had in decades. Like I had finally taken off a heavy coat after trudging through a storm for far too long. Mark was waiting for me by the courthouse steps. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, grinning wide. Hell of a show, brother. I chuckled a low, raw sound. And it's not over. Because Sarah still had a little pride left. Still had the fantasy in her head that she could somehow salvage her reputation. She had no idea that I had already set the next part of the plan in motion. A reckoning not just in court, but in the world she thought she could manipulate forever. The final collapse was coming. And this time, it would be public, unstoppable, and complete. It began with a single letter. An unremarkable white envelope slid under her apartment door late one evening after she had been forced out of the house. Sarah had found herself renting a sad little one-bedroom flat on the rougher side of town, far from the country clubs and brunch spots she used to haunt. No manicured lawns here. Just cracked sidewalks, rusting cars, and neighbors who didn't even bother to hide their curiosity when she stumbled up the steps, red-eyed and humiliated. Inside that envelope was a summons. Not from me. From the school board. Apparently, in her desperation for sympathy and relevance, Sarah had begun offering parenting seminars at local community centers, spinning tales of hardship and perseverance. She used our old family photos without permission, told anyone who would listen that she had raised 2 beautiful children through years of hardship and sacrifice. Except the board had seen the news articles, the Facebook videos, the court documents now circulating through town like wildfire. And they didn't appreciate being lied to. She was being sued for misrepresentation and fraudulent use of materials. Sarah's world, already crumbling, was about to collapse completely. But the real masterstroke? It came the next morning when a private investigator, one I hadn't even hired personally, published a full expose on Sarah's activities over the years. The article hit the local paper, front page, no less. False wife. Community betrayed by Sarah Cole's decades of deceit. The piece laid it all out. The affairs. The secret accounts she had opened in my name to siphon money. The fake charities she had donated to. which were nothing but fronts for her side flings businesses. It wasn't just petty gossip anymore. It was documented fraud. The woman who had once bragged that she would move on to bigger and better things now couldn't step outside without heads turning, whispers following her every move. She couldn't even get a job at a local diner. Too toxic, too public, too exposed. I sat back on the porch of my brother's house that evening, a cold beer in hand, scrolling through the article on my phone. Every word was a nail in the coffin she had built herself. Mark leaned over, grinning. "You really think she's going to survive this?" I shook my head slowly. She won't even see the next blow coming. Because Sarah still thought the kids, Sam and Victoria, were her last card. That even if the town turned its back, they would stand by her. She had no idea what was waiting. Sam, who had been distant and cold to me since adolescence, had quietly requested a DNA test of his own, on his own initiative. He had called me 2 nights ago, voice shaking, when the results came in. "I always wondered why I never looked like you," he said. I thought you didn't care." My heart broke a little hearing that. "I cared more than you'll ever know, son," I said quietly. "Still do." "And Victoria?" She was even angrier. Not at me. At Sarah. Apparently, during the chaos, Victoria had discovered a stash of old letters hidden in a locked drawer. Letters her biological father had written years ago, begging Sarah to let him be part of her life. Letters Sarah had hidden, lied about, while letting me believe Victoria was mine and letting Victoria believe I didn't care. It wasn't just betrayal toward me. It was betrayal toward them too. And they were furious. Sam posted his DNA results online, on every social platform he had. Victoria followed suit, attaching copies of her own results along with scanned copies of the letters Sarah had hidden. Both of them wrote long, furious posts laying the blame exactly where it belonged. Not on me. Not on themselves. On her. Sarah woke up to a world where even her own children had denounced her, publicly and brutally. And it spread faster than anything before. Within 24 hours, every friend she had left, those last clingers-on who had believed her tales of victimhood, had dropped her like a burning coal. Nobody wanted to be associated with a woman who had lied about her marriage, her children, her finances, and her very identity. Not even out of pity. Not even behind closed doors. Sarah was radioactive. Untouchable. Alone. Exactly the fate she had once mocked me with. "You'll die alone, Richard," she had screamed that day outside the lawyer's office. And now? It wasn't me staring down that barrel. It was her. And she was just beginning to realize it. The next week was brutal, for her. Sarah tried to fight back, but it was like watching someone flail against a tidal wave. Every move she made just dragged her under faster. She posted more rambling videos, doubling down on the lies, spinning new ones even crazier than the last. She blamed me. She blamed the kids. She blamed small-town mentality. She even blamed my father, dead and buried, claiming he had manipulated DNA tests from the grave. The internet was merciless. Screenshots, memes, TikToks roasting her crocodile tears. Clips of her screaming about how she deserved everything went viral, with comment sections full of brutal jokes and disgusted strangers. Nobody bought her act anymore. Even the women's group she used to brag about belonging to, the ones she'd sip wine with and sneer at lesser wives, kicked her out publicly. A simple post. "We do not support fraud, betrayal, or dishonesty. We distance ourselves entirely from Sarah Cole and her behavior." That post got more likes than anything their page had ever seen. Sarah, once queen of the neighborhood brunches and PDA events, was now a pariah in the same streets where she used to strut like royalty. And the vultures smelled blood. Creditors came knocking first. Turns out, all the emergency shopping sprees she'd gone on after the divorce papers hit, those weren't paid for. They were stacked on maxed-out credit cards in her name only. Another little legal detail my lawyer made sure of before we filed. Debt collectors started hammering her phone, her door, her email. Then came the eviction notice. She hadn't paid rent on her dingy apartment in 2 months. 30 days, they told her. Pack up. Get out. But where was she going to go? Nobody wanted her. Her old friends weren't returning calls. Even her own mother, a sharp old woman who had never liked me, had changed her number to dodge Sarah's sobbing voicemails. The final humiliation, though, wasn't private. It was public. Massively public. The local news station, the same one that used to cover every charity event and photo op Sarah inserted herself into, ran a segment titled, "From Charity Queen to Conwoman, The Rise and Fall of Sarah Cole." There she was, splashed across the screen. Photos of her crying outside the courthouse, screenshots of her Facebook rants, quotes from court documents about the paternity fraud, the financial scams. Sarah's once pristine image was obliterated. There was no repairing it. And as all of it unfolded, while she howled and thrashed and threatened lawsuits she couldn't afford, I lived my life. Peacefully. For the first time in decades. I spent weekends with real family. Cookouts. Baseball games. Sunday dinners where the laughter was real, the smiles didn't hide knives behind them. Sam started visiting more. Victoria too. Not because they had to. Because they wanted to. We started building something new. Something honest. No more secrets. No more lies. One evening, as we sat around a bonfire, Victoria leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "I'm sorry it took me so long to see the truth." I didn't say anything. I just squeezed her hand. Some wounds don't heal with words. They heal with time. With love. With truth. Sarah, meanwhile, spiraled lower. She was spotted living out of her car in a Walmart parking lot 2 towns over, still screaming at anyone who would listen that she was the real victim. But nobody was listening anymore. Nobody cared. She was forgotten. Discarded. Exactly how she had treated everyone else who no longer served her. It should have been enough. It almost was. But there was one final act left. One last move to make sure she understood exactly what she had lost, and exactly who had taken it from her. And that moment was coming faster than she could ever prepare for. I had been planning it patiently, coldly, meticulously, because some lessons have to be etched into the soul. And I was going to carve this one so deep, she'd feel it until her last breath. The opportunity presented itself almost too perfectly. A charity gala. One of the few remaining ties to Sarah's old world, a small, local event she had once helped organize, back when she was still pretending to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect everything. It was being held downtown in the community center. Low-key, but still important enough to draw a crowd. Business owners, politicians, teachers, local celebrities. The kind of people Sarah once lived to impress. I found out through one of the organizers that she had tried to weasel her way back in begging for a volunteer spot, promising to help set up decorations, offering to work the coat check. Pathetic, desperate scraps just to be near the kind of attention she used to drink like fine wine. They turned her down, of course. But she was still planning to show up. I knew she couldn't resist. Not with the press there. Not with the chance to claw back even a shred of her old image. So I made my move. The night of the gala, I arrived in a tailored charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt, polished boots. A quiet entrance, no flashy arrivals, no grandstanding. Just me, clean, composed, untouchable, and flanked by Sam and Victoria, my real family. The second we stepped inside, heads turned. People whispered, smiled. Some even clapped me on the back, congratulating me quietly, offering sympathy without pity. The tide had long since turned in my favor. Sarah was already there, lurking at the edges of the room in a too-tight dress, her hair overstyled, her eyes darting nervously around like a cornered animal. When she saw us, it hit her like a punch to the gut. I didn't have to say a word. I just smiled. And slowly, with perfect timing, I made my way toward the front of the room where the evening's program was about to begin. Mr. Howard, one of the gala's main donors, spotted me and waved me up onto the small stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, voice booming through the hall, "we have a very special announcement tonight. One that honors a man who exemplifies loyalty, perseverance, and integrity, values this community was built on." I saw Sarah trying to edge closer through the crowd, her face pale, her mouth slightly open. She thought it would be her moment. It wasn't. Mr. Howard went on. "Tonight, we are proud to announce the Samuel Cole Community Scholarship, named in honor of Richard Cole's late father, a man who believed in second chances and family, and standing strong even in the face of betrayal." The word betrayal echoed sharply across the room. Every eye turned toward me, and toward Sarah. She froze, visibly trembling now. Victoria came up beside me, took my arm, her face glowing with pride. Sam stood on my other side, a steady presence. Together, we accepted the award, the plaque, the scholarship announcement, all of it. Applause filled the room, drowning out the sound of Sarah's heavy breathing, the pitiful, strangled noises she was trying to swallow. She wasn't part of this. Not anymore. She wasn't honored. She wasn't celebrated. She wasn't even acknowledged. She was just a ghost at the edge of the crowd, unseen, unwanted, fading. After the ceremony, as people mingled and music played, Sarah made one last pathetic attempt. She stumbled toward me, grabbing at my sleeve, eyes wide and frantic. "Richard, please," she hissed under her breath. "We can fix this. We can explain." I was confused. I was scared. I made mistakes, but I stepped back, pulling free from her grasp like she was nothing more than smoke. "Explain it to someone who still cares," I said, my voice low enough for her alone to hear. I turned and walked away without another glance, leaving her standing there. Alone. Truly, finally, alone. The final lesson burned into her soul. There would be no comeback. No sympathy. No redemption. Sarah had built her life on lies. And now, all that remained was the ashes. I had given her exactly what she had promised me that day in front of the lawyer's office, what she had laughed about, bragged about, threatened. To die alone. Only now, it was her destiny, and it was sealed. I didn't look back. Not once. As I left the gala hall that night, stepping out into the cool spring air, the sounds of laughter and music fading behind me, I felt something I hadn't tasted in what felt like a lifetime. Peace. Real peace. Not the hollow, desperate kind I used to force myself to believe in while living under Sarah's thumb. Not the fake, surface-level peace of pretending everything was fine while lies ate me alive from the inside. No. This was different. It was clean. Sharp. Absolute. Sam and Victoria flanked me as we crossed the parking lot, walking together like a real family again. I glanced over at them, my son, my daughter, and felt no bitterness that we didn't share blood. Blood hadn't made them mine. Choice had. Love had. Truth had. Sarah's poison had been burned out of all our lives. It hadn't been easy. God knows, it had almost destroyed me. But standing here now, breathing in the cold night air, feeling my kids beside me, knowing that the future was finally mine to shape without chains. It was worth it. We stopped by my truck. Sam clapped me on the back with a grin. Victoria leaned in and hugged me fiercely, whispering, "We love you, Dad." And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I truly believed it. Not because someone told me to. Not because I needed it to survive. Because it was real. When I got back to my new house, a modest place, nothing fancy but full of warmth, I found a small package waiting on my doorstep. No sender listed. Just my name, scrawled in messy handwriting. I knew instantly it was from her. Curious, I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and carefully opened it. Inside was a photo. An old one. From the early days, our wedding day, when Sarah had smiled at me like I was the center of her universe. Before the mask slipped. Before the rot set in. Taped to the back was a note. 5 simple words. "You should have fought harder." I stared at it for a long time. Then, without hesitation, I tore the photo in half, dropped it into the fireplace, and watched it curl and blacken into ash. There was nothing left to mourn. Nothing left to save. Sarah's story was over. And mine? Mine was just beginning. I spent the next weeks rebuilding everything she had tried to tear down. Reconnecting with old friends. Taking my mom out to lunch every Saturday. Coaching Little League. Fixing up the old cabin Dad had left me. Turning it into a place where Sam and Victoria could bring their future kids someday. I lived. I thrived. I became the man I had buried for too long beneath her lies. And as for Sarah, every now and then, I'd hear whispers. Rumors of her drifting from town to town, trying to find someone else to believe her sob stories, trying to start over. But it never lasted. Word traveled faster than she could. And every time she thought she had found new ground to stand on, it crumbled under her feet. Because truth has a way of following you. Of haunting you. Of demanding payment, no matter how far you run. Sarah paid. Oh, she paid. And I never lifted a finger. She destroyed herself. exactly as she deserved. In the end, I didn't have to die alone. She did. And there was a savage, undeniable justice in that. Justice she had written with her own hand. Justice I would carry with me, quietly, every time I smiled without looking over my shoulder, every time I sat at a dinner table surrounded by laughter and love that was real, not performed. Every time I woke up and remembered. I was free. Forever.